The morning sun cast long shadows across the hospital corridor as Catherine walked slowly beside the wheelchair. Her hand rested gently on William's shoulder, feeling the tension that had become his constant companion over the past few months. The diagnosis had come like a thunderbolt on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, changing everything they thought they knew about their future together. Dr. Matthews had explained the rare condition with careful words, his voice gentle but firm. The progressive illness would steal William's mobility first, then his speech, and eventually his ability to breathe without assistance. They had perhaps 18 months together, maybe less. Catherine had gripped William's hand so tightly that day that her knuckles turned white, but William had squeezed back just as hard, his eyes never leaving her face. Now, 3 months later, William could no longer walk without help. The strong man who had once carried her across the threshold of their first home now needed assistance to move from room to room. But his spirit remained unbroken, and his love for Catherine burned as bright as ever. "Remember our first dance?" William asked softly as they reached the hospital garden. His voice had grown weaker, but it still carried that warmth that had first captured Catherine's heart 20 years ago. Catherine smiled through the tears that threatened to spill. "You stepped on my dress and nearly tore the hem. I was so angry, but then you looked at me with those apologetic eyes and I couldn't stay mad." "I was nervous," William admitted, his breathing slightly labored. "You were the most beautiful woman in the room, and I couldn't believe you had said yes to dancing with me." The garden was quiet, except for the gentle rustling of leaves in the autumn breeze. Other patients and their families moved slowly along the pathways, each dealing with their own struggles and heartaches. But for Catherine and William, the world had narrowed to just the two of them, and the precious time they had left. Catherine had quit her job as a teacher to spend every possible moment with William. Their savings were dwindling as medical bills mounted, but she refused to consider anything else. Her sister Emma had offered to help financially, and their church community had rallied around them with meals and support, but Catherine felt the weight of responsibility heavily on her shoulders. William watched his wife's face carefully. He knew the burden she was carrying, and it broke his heart more than his own diagnosis. "Katie," he said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use, "I need you to promise me something." She turned to face him fully, her green eyes searching his face. "What is it?" "When I'm gone, I need you to live. Really live. Not just exist, but find joy again. Travel to Paris like we always talked about. Learn to paint. Fall in love with life again." "Don't," Catherine whispered, shaking her head. "Don't talk like that. We still have time." "We do have time," William agreed. "And I want to use every second of it to make sure you'll be okay when I can't be here to take care of you anymore." The next few weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, stolen moments of normalcy, and the gradual acceptance of their new reality. William's condition progressed faster than the doctors had predicted. His legs grew weaker, his hands began to shake, and speaking became more difficult. But their love story continued to unfold in small, beautiful moments. Catherine would read to him every evening, her voice painting pictures of distant lands and grand adventures. William would listen with his eyes closed, a peaceful smile on his face, storing away the sound of her voice for whatever came next. Their friends visited regularly, each trying to maintain a cheerful facade while struggling with their own grief. Mike, William's best friend since college, brought photo albums filled with memories of their younger days. Sarah, Catherine's closest friend, helped with household tasks and grocery shopping, never mentioning how Catherine had lost weight or how dark the circles under her eyes had become. One evening, as Catherine helped William into bed, he took her hand with surprising strength. "I want to give you something," he said, reaching under his pillow. He pulled out a small wooden box that she recognized as the one his grandfather had given him years ago. William, what is this? She asked, though her heart already knew. Open it, he said softly. Inside was a simple gold bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a heart. Engraved on the heart were the words, "Forever yours," in William's careful handwriting. I had it made before we knew I was sick, he explained. I was going to give it to you on our anniversary next month, but I want you to have it now, while I can still put it on your wrist myself. With trembling fingers, William fastened the bracelet around Catherine's wrist. She held up her hand to catch the lamplight on the small heart, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Now you'll always have a piece of my heart with you, William said. Catherine leaned down and kissed his forehead, tasting the salt of her own tears. You gave me your whole heart 20 years ago, she whispered. This is just a beautiful reminder. That night, Catherine lay awake listening to William's breathing, memorizing the rhythm, afraid that sleep might steal away precious moments. Outside their bedroom window, the world continued its normal pace, but inside their small sanctuary, time felt both infinite and desperately short. The morning brought new challenges. William could no longer feed himself without help, and his speech was becoming increasingly difficult to understand. But his eyes remained clear and full of love, and Catherine found strength in their depths that she didn't know she possessed. Dr. Matthews visited that afternoon, his expression grave as he examined William. When he finished, he asked to speak with Catherine privately in the hallway. His condition is progressing very rapidly, the doctor said gently. I think it's time to consider hospice care. We can make arrangements for him to be comfortable at home. Catherine nodded, though her chest felt tight with unshed tears. How long do we have? Weeks, maybe a month or two at most. I'm sorry, Mrs. Catherine. I wish I had better news. When Catherine returned to the room, William was looking out the window at the garden where they had spent so many peaceful hours together. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and she saw in his eyes that he already knew what the doctor had told her. Home? He asked simply. Yes, she replied. We're going home. The hospice nurse arrived on a Tuesday morning, carrying a small bag of medical supplies and a gentle smile that somehow made everything feel both more real and more manageable. Her name was Margaret, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands that moved with practiced gentleness as she checked William's vital signs. We're going to make sure he's comfortable, Margaret told Catherine as she set up the oxygen equipment in their bedroom. And we're here to support you too. You don't have to do this alone. But Catherine felt alone, even surrounded by the love and support of their community. The weight of watching the man she loved slowly slip away was something no amount of casseroles or flower deliveries could lighten. She had become his full-time caregiver, learning to operate medical equipment and administer medications with a precision that surprised her. William's sister, Helen, drove in from 3 states away, bringing their mother, who was now in her 80s and struggling to understand why her youngest son was dying before her. The house filled with family members taking turns at his bedside, sharing stories and memories. But William seemed to save his clearest moments for when he and Catherine were alone. Tell me about your dreams, he whispered one afternoon as Catherine sat beside him holding his hand. His voice was barely audible now, but she had learned to read his lips and understand his expressions. My dreams are all about you getting better, she replied. He shook his head slightly. Your other dreams, the ones from before we knew. Tell me about Paris. Catherine smiled through her tears. They had planned to visit Paris for their 20th wedding anniversary, saving money little by little for the trip. The travel brochures were still tucked in her jewelry box, filled with circled attractions and carefully noted restaurant recommendations. I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower at sunset, she said, and eat croissants at a sidewalk cafe while watching people walk by. We were going to take a boat ride on the Seine and visit the Louvre. You'll still do all those things, William said with quiet certainty. Promise me you'll go. Take some of my ashes with you and scatter them from the Eiffel Tower." Catherine wanted to protest, to tell him not to talk about such things, but she saw the urgency in his eyes. He needed to know that she would be okay, that his death wouldn't be the end of her story. "I promise," she whispered. The days blended together in a routine of medications, gentle exercises, and stolen conversations. William slept more now, but when he was awake, he focused all his energy on Catherine. He would watch her face while she read to him, study her expressions while she moved around the room, storing away every detail. Their nephew Tommy, Helen's teenage son, visited one weekend and brought his guitar. He played some of William and Catherine's favorite songs, his young voice filling the house with melodies that brought back memories of happier times. William listened with his eyes closed, occasionally mouthing the words to songs that had been the soundtrack to their love story. "Play The Way You Look Tonight," William requested in a voice so soft that Tommy had to lean close to hear him. As the familiar melody filled the room, William's eyes found Catherine's. She remembered dancing to that song at their wedding, young and full of dreams about the future they would build together. Now, 20 years later, she was learning that love could be both the most beautiful and the most painful thing in the world. Margaret visited every few days, monitoring William's condition and teaching Catherine how to manage his increasing needs. "You're doing an amazing job," she told Catherine one afternoon. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Catherine replied. "Every marriage should be this full of love." As William's ability to speak diminished, he and Catherine developed their own language of touches and glances. A squeeze of his hand meant "I love you." A soft touch on her cheek meant "thank you." When he struggled to breathe, she would place her hand on his chest and breathe with him, their bodies finding a rhythm together. The community that had surrounded them throughout William's illness continued to show up in countless ways. Their mailbox filled with cards from people they barely knew who had heard their story. The local newspaper wrote a small article about their love story after a friend nominated them, and letters poured in from strangers offering prayers and support. One evening, as Catherine sat reading beside William's bed, she noticed his breathing had changed. It was shallower, more labored, and she felt a chill of fear run down her spine. She called Margaret, who arrived within 30 minutes and confirmed what Catherine already knew in her heart. "It's time to call the family," Margaret said gently. The house filled with quiet voices and gentle tears as family members gathered around William's bed. His mother held one hand while Catherine held the other. Helen sat at the foot of the bed, sharing memories of their childhood adventures. Tommy played soft guitar melodies in the corner. But as the hours passed, it became clear that William was waiting for something. He seemed restless, his breathing uneven, his eyes searching Catherine's face with an intensity that broke her heart. "What is it?" "My love," Catherine whispered, leaning close to his ear. "What do you need?" With enormous effort, William mouthed a single word. "Permission." Catherine understood immediately. He was holding on for her sake, afraid to leave her alone with her grief. She took his face in her hands and looked directly into his eyes. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady despite the tears flowing down her cheeks. "It's okay to go. I'll be all right. I have so much love from you stored up in my heart that it will last me the rest of my life. You can rest now." William's eyes filled with relief and an overwhelming love that seemed to light up the room. He squeezed her hand with surprising strength, and for a moment she saw the young man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. The sun was setting outside their bedroom window, painting the walls with golden light when William took his last breath. It was peaceful, surrounded by love, exactly as he would have wanted it. Catherine sat with him for a long time after his breathing stopped, holding his hand and talking to him about their memories, about her promises to live fully, about how grateful she was for every moment they had shared together. Margaret quietly took care of the necessary arrangements while the family said their private goodbyes. Helen made phone calls to distant relatives and close friends, her voice steady but her eyes red with tears. When the funeral director arrived, Catherine finally stood up from her chair beside the bed. She leaned down and kissed William's forehead one last time, whispering, "Until we meet again, my darling." As they wheeled him away, Catherine felt simultaneously empty and full, empty of the physical presence that had been her anchor for 20 years, but full of love and memories that no amount of time could diminish. The funeral service was held on a bright Thursday morning in the small church where William and Catherine had been married 20 years earlier. The same altar where they had exchanged vows now held a simple wooden casket surrounded by white lilies, William's favorite flowers. Catherine had worried that only a handful of people would attend, but as she arrived at the church, she was amazed to see cars lining both sides of the street for several blocks. The sanctuary was packed with familiar faces, and many she didn't recognize. People whose lives had been touched by their story of love and courage in the face of tragedy. The pastor, Reverend Michael, had known William and Catherine since they were newlyweds. His words were simple but powerful, speaking about love that transcends death and the gift that William and Catherine had given to everyone who witnessed their journey together. Catherine had asked Tommy to play "The Way You Look Tonight" during the service. As his guitar filled the church with the gentle melody, people wept openly, remembering their own love stories and the people they had lost along the way. When it came time for Catherine to speak, she walked to the podium with steady steps, wearing the blue dress that William had always said brought out her eyes. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt wrapped in their collective love and support. "William taught me that love isn't just about the happy times," she began, her voice clear and strong. "It's about choosing each other every single day, through sickness and health, through fear and hope, through the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones." She spoke about their first meeting in college, when William had accidentally spilled coffee on her textbook and spent an hour helping her copy the stained pages. She shared stories of their early marriage, their struggles and dreams, and the way William's laughter could fill their small apartment with joy. "In his final weeks, William worried most about me," Catherine continued. "He made me promise to keep living, to find joy again, to honor our love by embracing life fully. And I intend to keep that promise, not just for him, but for all of you who have shown us what community and love really mean." After the service, people lined up to hug Catherine and share their own memories of William. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store talked about how William always asked about her grandchildren. The mailman remembered how William would wait on the porch with a cold drink on hot summer days. Strangers shared how reading about their love story in the newspaper had inspired them to appreciate their own relationships more deeply. The burial was a smaller, more intimate affair attended by close family and friends. Catherine had chosen a plot under an old oak tree in the peaceful cemetery on the edge of town. As the casket was lowered into the ground, she felt a hand slip into hers. It was Helen, William's sister, offering silent support. "He's still with you," Helen whispered. "Love like yours doesn't just disappear." The weeks following the funeral were the hardest of Catherine's life. The house felt impossibly empty without William's presence. His coffee cup still sat in the kitchen sink, where she couldn't bring herself to wash it. His books remained open on the nightstand, marking places he would never return to read. Margaret, the hospice nurse, stopped by regularly during those first few weeks, not as a medical professional, but as a friend who understood grief. She helped Catherine sort through William's belongings, sharing stories and tears as they decided what to keep and what to donate. "Grief isn't something you get over," Margaret told her one afternoon as they folded William's sweaters. "It's something you learn to carry, and in time, it becomes less like a weight and more like a treasured possession." Catherine found comfort in routine. She returned to substitute teaching at the local elementary school, finding purpose in the bright faces and endless energy of children. They asked direct questions about why she looked sad sometimes, and she answered honestly, in age-appropriate ways, about love and loss and the importance of cherishing the people we care about. 3 months after William's death, Catherine received an unexpected phone call. A producer from a national television show had heard about their story and wanted to feature it in a segment about extraordinary love stories. At first, Catherine declined, feeling that their private grief shouldn't become public entertainment. But that night, she remembered William's words about living fully and making their love matter beyond just the two of them. She called the producer back the next day. The interview was filmed in their living room, with Catherine sitting in the same chair where she had read to William during his illness. She spoke about their love story with honesty and grace, sharing both the beautiful moments and the painful ones. "People often ask me how I got through it," Catherine told the interviewer. "But the truth is, I didn't have to get through loving William. Loving him even through his illness and death was a privilege. The hard part isn't the loving, it's learning to live with a heart that's both broken and completely full." The segment aired on a Sunday evening and reached millions of homes across the country. Catherine's phone rang for days afterward with calls from people sharing their own stories of love and loss. She received hundreds of letters from viewers who said her words had helped them appreciate their own relationships or cope with their own grief. A year after William's death, Catherine finally booked the trip to Paris. She carried a small portion of his ashes in a beautiful wooden box that Helen had given her, along with the travel brochures they had saved together. Paris was everything they had dreamed it would be. Catherine stood at the top of the Eiffel Tower at sunset, surrounded by other tourists taking photos and exclaiming over the view. But for her, the moment was sacred and private. She opened the small box and let a gentle breeze carry some of William's ashes out over the city. "You made it to Paris after all," she whispered. She spent a week in the city, visiting the Louvre, eating croissants at sidewalk cafes, and taking a sunset cruise on the Seine. But more than that, she found herself engaging with life again in ways she hadn't since William's diagnosis. She struck up conversations with fellow travelers, tried foods she had never tasted, and took photographs not just of landmarks, but of moments of beauty and joy. On her last night in Paris, Catherine sat at a small restaurant near her hotel, writing in the journal she had started keeping since William's death. A young couple at the next table was clearly on their honeymoon, gazing into each other's eyes with the same intensity she and William had shared as newlyweds. Instead of feeling sad, Catherine felt grateful. She walked over to their table and asked the waiter to put their dinner on her bill, leaving a note that simply said, "Celebrate every moment of your love story. From someone who knows how precious it is." When Catherine returned home from Paris, she found her house filled with flowers from neighbors welcoming her back. Her garden had been tended by friends, and her mailbox was full of cards from people checking on her. But the most meaningful surprise was waiting on her kitchen table. A small potted plant from Margaret with a note that read, "For new growth, new beginnings, and the continuing story of a heart that knows how to love." Catherine realized in that moment that her story wasn't over. William's death wasn't the end of their love story. It was the beginning of a new chapter where she would carry their love forward into whatever came next. She began volunteering with the hospice organization, offering support to other families facing terminal diagnoses. She started a grief support group at her church, creating a space where people could share their stories and find comfort in community. Most importantly, she kept her promise to William to live fully. She learned to paint, taking classes at the community center where her instructor praised her natural eye for capturing emotion in her work. She traveled to places they had dreamed of visiting together, always carrying a small portion of William's ashes to leave in beautiful spots around the world. 5 years after William's death, Catherine was asked to speak at a national conference for caregivers and hospice workers. Standing before hundreds of people who dedicated their lives to caring for others in their final days, she shared the lessons her love story had taught her. "Love doesn't end with death," she told the audience. "It transforms. It becomes a legacy that touches every person we meet and every choice we make. William lives on in every act of kindness I perform, every sunset I stop to appreciate, every moment of joy I allow myself to feel." Catherine's story touched hearts across the nation, inspiring countless people to appreciate their own relationships more deeply and face their own challenges with greater courage. She received letters from people who said her example had helped them through their darkest moments and encouraged them to love more boldly. But for Catherine, the greatest tribute to William's memory was simply this: she had kept her promise to live. She had honored their love by refusing to let grief diminish her capacity for joy, by choosing to see each new day as a gift rather than a burden. As she sat in her garden on the 10th anniversary of William's death, reading a letter from a woman whose husband had recently been diagnosed with the same illness William had faced, Catherine realized that their love story had become something bigger than either of them had ever imagined. It had become a beacon of hope for others facing impossible circumstances, a reminder that love truly is the strongest force in the universe. The sun was setting behind the oak tree in her backyard, the same tree under which she and William had exchanged vows in an impromptu ceremony during their second year of marriage. Catherine touched the heart-shaped charm on her bracelet, still wearing it every day as a reminder of the love that had shaped her life. "Thank you for teaching me how to love without limits," she whispered to the evening sky. "And thank you for trusting me to carry our story forward." In the distance, church bells began to ring, just as they had on the day she and William first met, the day they married, and the day she said goodbye to him. But tonight, the bells didn't sound like an ending. They sounded like a celebration of love that had transcended every obstacle, including death itself. Catherine smiled, closed her eyes, and felt William's presence in the gentle evening breeze, in the laughter of children playing in a nearby yard, and in the endless capacity of her own heart to love, lose, grieve, and love again. Their farewell had indeed moved a nation, but more importantly, it had proven that true love never really says goodbye.